At 12:07 a.m., the ER doors exploded open and a ranger unit carried in a dying man who should not have existed. They did not ask for the surgeon. They did not ask for the trauma chief. They asked for one nurse by name, Abby Mercer. Most nights in an emergency room are built from ordinary fear. Burned coffee, wet boots on tile. A mother whispering prayers beside a stretcher. A nurse pretending her hands are not tired because someone else's life still depends on them. But that night was different. One wounded stranger brought blood secrets and a broken compass into Abby's hospital. Before sunrise, the life she trusted would begin to crack open. Stay with this story until the end because some truths do not come to heal us. They come to find out what we are strong enough to survive. Like the video and comment where you're watching from. The last thing Abby Mercer heard before the elevator doors closed was the wounded man trying to breathe around blood and pain. Then the doors sealed shut and the ER swallowed the silence he left behind. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The trauma bay looked like a room after a storm had passed through it. Bloody gauze lay in the steel basin. A torn tactical shirt hung off the side rail of the gurney they had just wheeled away. Rainwater from the ranger unit's boots streaked the tile in dark smears mixing with thin red footprints that led from the ambulance entrance to Trauma 1. Abby stood in the middle of it with her gloves still on. Her hands were red to the wrists. A nurse named Tessa looked at her from the supply cart, young enough to still believe there was always a right answer if you found it fast enough. Abby Tessa said carefully, "Are you okay?" Abby looked down at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. "Restock the bay," she said. Tessa blinked. "What?" "2 trauma packs. 4 saline bags. More suction tubing. And tell housekeeping we need a clean floor before the next ambulance backs in." Tessa stared another second, then nodded and moved. That was how Abby survived nights that tried to climb inside her. She turned catastrophe into tasks. Pressure here, tape there, chart the time, check the airway, call blood bank. Keep your voice even. Never let the room know when your own pulse was no longer listening to you. But this was different. A federal recovery team had come through her ER doors like a breach team entering hostile ground. A dying stranger had known her name. Major Grant Hollis had spoken her father's name as if Wade Mercer belonged to some sealed part of the world, not to a small kitchen in Wilmington where he used to drink coffee too black and leave grease on every glass he touched. And then there was the patch. Abby picked it up from the floor before anyone else could step on it. The fabric was wet, torn at one edge, dark with blood at the corner. The symbol had been stitched in black and white. A compass rose. The north point cut through by a clean white slash. Under it, in small letters, were the words she had seen only once before, in that brief, impossible moment while the wounded man was being wheeled away. Mercer line active. Her last name. Her father's last name. A name that had always meant hospital bills, engine parts, late birthday cards, and a father who disappeared for days and came back smelling of rain and boat fuel. Not this. Not armed men. Not national security. Not blood on the floor at midnight. Dr. Lionel Shaw stepped beside her, pulling off his surgical cap with one hand. "I want an explanation," he said. Abby slipped the patch into her scrub pocket. "So do I." Shaw's eyes narrowed. He was a good trauma physician, impatient, brilliant, and convinced most rules had been written by people who had never watched a patient die. He had been angry when the armed men entered. Now he looked unsettled. "They tried to block electronic charting. I heard. They tried to keep his name off the system. I heard that too. And they asked for you." Abby looked toward the elevator at the end of the hall. "Yes." Shaw lowered his voice. "Do you know him?" "Number. Do you know them?" "No." "Then why did that man say your father's name?" Abby turned to him. "I do not know." The answer came out flat enough to end the conversation, but Shaw had worked with her for too long to mistake control for calm. His expression softened just barely. "Go sit down for 5 minutes." She almost smiled. "In what hospital?" "Fine. Go pretend to chart something until your face stops looking like that." "My face is none of your business." It is when it scares my residents. Abby glanced toward the nurse's station. 2 residents stood there trying not to stare at her and failing badly. She stripped off her gloves and dropped them in the red bin. For the first time since the doors had exploded open, she noticed the tremor in her fingers. She closed her hand into a fist. Once. Then she opened it and walked back into the ER. The rest of the shift did not stop because her life had begun to tilt. Hospitals never gave that kind of mercy. A college student came in vomiting after too much tequila. A dock worker needed stitches across his palm after catching it on a rusted cleat. An older woman arrived, short of breath, scared but pretending not to be, because her husband looked more frightened than she did. Abby moved through them all. She adjusted oxygen. She started IVs. She called pharmacy when a medication was missing and used the tone that made people find things quickly. She placed a warm blanket over the older woman's knees and told her husband where to stand so he did not block the monitor. All the while, her mind kept returning to the man upstairs, Caleb Rowe. She had heard Hollis say it once into his radio before the elevator closed. Not that it helped. The name meant nothing. The voice did. Not because she recognized it exactly. She did not. But there had been something in the way he said Abby, like the name had been carried for years through bad weather. And then he had said the broken compass. By 4 in the morning, the ER had settled into the low mechanical rhythm that came before dawn. Monitors clicked. Printers sighed. Rain tapped against the ambulance bay glass. Someone had made new coffee, but it already smelled burned. Abby stood at a computer station staring at a chart without reading it. Her father had died 7 years earlier in a county hospital outside Wilmington after a heart attack that had begun while he was arguing with a mechanic about an unpaid invoice. Wade Mercer had been 71, stubborn and furious that his own body had finally won an argument. He had died wearing socks with a hole in the heel. He had asked Abby if the hospital coffee was always that bad. His last words had not been profound. They had been ordinary. Do not let them tow my truck. That was the man she knew. A man with engine oil under his nails. A man who taught her to check tire pressure and sharpen a pocket knife. A man who could vanish on a Thursday and return on a Sunday with no explanation except work ran long. A man who kissed the top of her head when she was little and later seemed to forget how close he was allowed to stand. A bad communicator. A decent mechanic. A complicated father. Not an asset. Not a courier. Not someone a federal officer quoted in the middle of a trauma bay. At 5:18 a.m., Abby signed off her last medication note and walked toward the surgical recovery unit. The hospital was changing shifts. Daylight had not fully arrived, but the building had begun to wake. Wheels rolled over tile. Nurses traded reports in low voices. The smell of disinfectant thickened in the hallways. Somewhere near pediatrics, a child cried and then stopped when someone found the right song on a phone. Abby took the elevator to the 4th floor. A man in a dark suit stood outside room 416. He was not hospital security. He was not local law enforcement. His hair was cut close. His shoes were too clean for the weather, and his eyes moved once to her badge, once to her hands, once to the hallway behind her. Name, he said. Abigail Mercer. He stepped aside. No call, no question, no hesitation. That unsettled her more than if he had tried to stop her. Inside the room was dim, except for the monitor above the bed. Caleb Rowe lay propped slightly upright, pale against the pillow with a nasal cannula under his nose and 2 IV lines running into his arm. The surgery had bought him time. Abby could read that much from the drain, the pressure, the careful tension around the bandage. Time was not safety. Time was only a narrow bridge. His eyes opened when she entered. For a moment he looked confused. Then his gaze found her and held. "You came back," he said. His voice was rough, scraped thin by anesthesia and pain. Abby stopped at the foot of the bed. "I work here." His mouth moved like he might smile, but the effort failed. "That is not why." She folded her arms. "Start with your name. Caleb Rowe. Who are you?" "A man who should have called sooner." "That is cute. Try useful." This time the smile almost made it. Wade said you had no patience for soft answers. The name struck her again. Abby stepped closer to the bed. My father is not part of your story. Caleb looked at her with a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Yes, he is. No. Wade Mercer was my father, too. The monitor kept its steady rhythm. Abby heard it too loudly. For a second, she was back in the room where Wade had died, watching a green line flatten, while some part of her still waited for him to sit up and complain. She shook her head once. No? Caleb closed his eyes either from pain or exhaustion. My mother was Lillian Rowe, Gulfport, Mississippi. She worked marina accounts, then cash transport, then nothing anyone was allowed to put on a tax form. Wade came through when I was 6, then 8, then 12. Sometimes he stayed 2 days, sometimes 2 hours. Abby gripped the footboard. Stop. He smelled like diesel and cold rain. He had a scar on the back of his right hand from a propeller blade. He kept peppermints in his jacket pocket and acted like children did not notice when he was afraid. Abby said nothing. He never sat with his back to a door. Her throat tightened despite herself. A memory rose without permission. Wade in a diner shifting seats with her mother because he did not like the view. Abby had been 13. She had rolled her eyes. Her mother had said, "Let your father have his little habits." Wade had smiled, but his eyes had never stopped checking the window. Caleb watched her face. You remember that. I remember a paranoid man. He called it preparation. He called a lot of things by names that made them sound less ugly. Caleb let out a thin breath. Fair. Abby studied him. In daylight, without blood covering half his face, she saw things she did not want to see. The line of his jaw, the shape of his brow, the way his left hand curled slightly against the blanket even at rest. Wade's hand did that when he was angry. Hers did too. She looked away first. You expect me to believe he had another family. No, Caleb said. I expect you not to want to. That was worse than a lie because it had weight. Abby pulled the chair closer but did not sit. Why come here? Because the old contact chain was exposed. English. Names tied to Wade's work have resurfaced. Family names. Backup routes. Safe locations. People connected to a maritime compartment that was supposed to be dead. Maritime compartment. She repeated the phrase with quiet disbelief. My father fixed boat engines. Sometimes. Abby's voice hardened. You are in a hospital bed because someone shot you. Do not waste the oxygen I am giving you. Caleb swallowed. Pain moved across his face. He moved cargo that did not exist, people who could not be seen, files that could not survive official channels. He knew harbors, weather windows, engines, smuggling routes. Men like Wade get used by men who need clean hands. Used by whom? Caleb's eyes shifted toward the door. That depends on the year. Not good enough. No, it never was. Abby wanted to leave. She wanted to go back downstairs, take report fix, a charting error, argue with radiology, and let this man become someone else's impossible problem. Instead, she sat. The chair made a soft scraping sound against the floor. Caleb's expression changed. Not triumph. Relief, maybe. Or grief. He gave me a compass, he said. Abby felt her pulse jump. Brass, Caleb continued. Scratched on the back. Needle never pointed true. Her hands went cold. Lots of people own compasses. He said north was only useful if you trusted the map. Abby stood so fast the chair slid back. Who told you that? Wade. My father gave me that compass when I was 16. I know. How? Because he talked about you when he drank too much and forgot how silence worked. Abby looked toward the small window. Dawn had turned the glass gray. The city beyond it was only a blur of rooftops and wet concrete. What did he say? Caleb was quiet long enough that she looked back at him. He said you had hands meant for saving people. He said you were the only one of us who chose a clean war. Abby hated that. Not because it was cruel, because it sounded like something Wade would say only when he was far away from the person who needed to hear it. My compass is in my locker, she said. Open it. It does not open. It does. She stared at him. What was in yours? A map reference. My mother found it after Wade stopped coming. She burned it before I could read it twice. Why? Caleb looked at the ceiling. Because some women get tired of being handed emergency exits instead of love. The words landed too precisely. Abby sat again slower this time. Her mother had died before Wade. She had never called him a liar. Not once. But there were nights Abby had seen her standing at the kitchen sink long after dinner, staring into the dark window, as if listening for an engine that had not turned into the driveway. "Why did you ask for me by name?" Abby asked. "Because Wade said if the line ever activated, you were the one least likely to panic. I am flattered by the dead man's confidence. He also said you were stubborn enough to make armed men wait their turn." Despite herself, Abby heard Hollis saying Wade said you would be difficult. Her anger sharpened again. "Major Hollis? Who is he?" Caleb's face closed slightly. "A man with access. That is not an answer. It is the safest one I can give you from a monitored room." She looked at the monitor above his bed, then at the vents, then at the door. "You think this room is bugged? I think every room is a room, until someone needs it to be something else." Abby rose. "Wonderful." Trauma patient with spy poetry. Caleb caught her wrist again. Not as hard as before. Enough to stop her. "Abby." She looked down at his hand. For years, she had believed herself to be an only child. It had shaped her in quiet ways. Only child grief. Only child duty. Only child responsibility when Wade died and every drawer in his house had become hers to empty. Now a stranger with Wade's hand was bleeding in her hospital and calling her by name. Caleb released her. "Open the compass," he said. Abby left without answering. The hallway outside room 416 felt too bright. The Federal Guard watched her expressionless. Abby walked past him before he could speak. She rode the elevator down alone. In the locker room, the day shift nurses were still settling in, laughing softly, complaining about parking, asking who had taken the last clean medium scrub top. Abby moved through them like a ghost with hospital shoes. Her locker was at the end of the row. She opened it. Inside were spare clogs, a sweatshirt, a roll of mints, an old photograph of Eli and Mara taped to the door, and at the bottom, wrapped in a faded towel, the brass compass. She had kept it for reasons she never examined too closely. Not love. Not exactly. Not forgiveness either. Maybe because throwing it away had felt like agreeing that Wade was only the worst parts of himself. She took it to a supply closet near the staff lounge and closed herself inside. The fluorescent light above her flickered once, then steadied. Shelves of gauze, saline tape, and sterile gloves surrounded her. Ordinary things. Useful things. Things that made sense. The compass sat in her palm heavier than she remembered. The brass casing was scratched along one side. The glass was cloudy. The needle inside leaned stubbornly away from north as it always had. She found a hemostat on a tray and worked the tip into the seam along the back. Nothing happened. She adjusted her grip, pressed harder. The back plate gave with a small metallic click. Abby stopped breathing. Inside, the hollow backing was a folded strip of waterproof paper, yellowed with age, but intact. Her hands had stayed steady through chest compressions, arterial bleeds, and mothers screaming in waiting rooms. They were not steady now. She unfolded the paper. 3 words were written in Wade Mercer's blocky hand. "When North breaks, listen." Abby read it once, then again. The words did not explain anything. They only proved that something had been waiting for her long before Caleb Rowe was carried through her ER doors. A knock sounded against the supply closet door. Abby folded the paper so quickly the edge cut her finger. "Abby," Tessa called. "You in there?" Abby stared at the tiny bead of blood rising on her fingertip. "Yes. You okay?" A ridiculous question. A kind one. Abby slipped the note into her scrub pocket and closed the compass. "Fine," she said. Tessa lingered. "You sure?" Abby looked at the shelves, at the hemostat in her hand, at the brass compass that had just become evidence. "No," she said quietly. There was a pause outside the door. "Do you need me to get Dr. Shaw?" Abby almost laughed. "No, I need you to check on bed 7. He is going to say his pain is a 3 because his wife is watching. It is a 7. Tessa breathed out, half amused, half worried. "Okay." Her footsteps moved away. Abby waited another moment, then returned the hemostat exactly where she had found it, and stepped into the hall. Major Grant Hollis was waiting near the elevators. He looked different without the chaos of the trauma bay around him. Still controlled, still unreadable. Dark jacket, damp hair, pale scar along his jaw. A man who had learned to stand in public spaces without ever giving his back completely to anyone. His eyes dropped to her pocket, then returned to her face. Abby walked straight toward him. You knew about the compass. Hollis did not pretend not to understand. I knew Wade left contingencies. For me, for more than you. That does not make me feel special. It was not meant to. She stepped closer. Who was my father? Hollis held her gaze. A mechanic. Do not insult me. A courier. A fixer. A maritime asset. A man who knew how to move through places official maps ignored. Abby felt the floor shift under her, though she did not move. You are telling me my father worked for the government. I am telling you men inside the government used him when they needed something done without a signature. That sounds like a crime wearing a flag. Hollis's expression did not change, but something in his eyes did. Sometimes it was. She absorbed that. Hospital sounds moved around them. A cart rattled past. A resident laughed too loudly at the nurse's station. Somewhere a call light chimed and chimed again. Life kept moving, while Abby stood in the center of a truth that had waited 7 years to open its mouth. What does Mercer line active mean, she asked. Hollis looked down the hallway before answering. It means someone found a family chain that was supposed to stay buried. My family. Yes. Caleb's too. Yes. How many others? Enough. Abby hated that word. Enough was what doctors said when they did not want to say too much. Enough blood loss. Enough damage. Enough time left to call the family. She lowered her voice. Why bring Caleb to me? Because he asked. That is not a reason. For him it was. Try yours. Hollis was silent for a beat. Because when he was hit, he was carrying information tied to Wade. He refused transport to a military facility. He refused 2 federal medical options. He said there was one nurse in Wilmington who would keep him alive and know when she was being lied to. Abby stared at him. Congratulations, he was half right. He is alive, and you're lying. Hollis almost smiled. Not with humor, with recognition. Wade was right about you. Stop saying his name like you earned it. That erased whatever almost smile had been there. For a moment, Abby saw something tired beneath the controlled surface. Regret, perhaps. Or old loyalty worn down to the bone. Then Hollis said, there are people looking for what Caleb came to deliver. What did he come to deliver? I do not know all of it. Another soft answer. A true one. Abby took the note from her pocket and held it up. When north breaks, listen. What does that mean? Hollis looked at the paper. His face tightened. It means Wade expected the official route to fail. Official route to what? Before Hollis could answer, his radio crackled once. He turned slightly listening. A voice spoke low and fast through static. Hollis's jaw set. Abby recognized the look. Not fear, assessment. He pressed the radio closer. Say again. The voice repeated something Abby could not make out. Hollis looked toward the elevators. Abby said, What happened? Caleb's pressure is dropping. She was moving before he finished. Room 416 had changed by the time Abby reached it. The calm monitor rhythm had become uneven. The nurse inside looked pale. The Federal Guard stood too close to the door, one hand near his jacket. Dr. Shaw was already at the bedside checking the dressing. Internal seep or clot shift, Shaw said as Abby entered. His pressure is soft. Abby moved to the IV line. Hang another unit. Already called. Call again. Caleb's eyes opened halfway. He searched the room and found Abby. Pain had stripped him down to something almost childlike. She leaned close. I opened it. His mouth twitched. Told you. You are not allowed to be smug while hypotensive. His breathing hitched. Hollis stood at the foot of the bed watching the door and the monitor at the same time. Caleb's hand moved weakly toward Abby. She took it before she could decide not to. His skin was cold. He whispered, "Listen to me. Not while your pressure is falling. Abby." The way he said her name made her look at him. His eyes were clearer than they should have been. "Your husband did not drown." The room seemed to lose all sound. Abby's fingers tightened around his. "What did you say?" Caleb's eyes fluttered, but he forced them open. Rourke knew the broken compass. Then his gaze slipped past her, and the monitor began to scream. The monitor screamed, and Abby moved before fear could finish forming. Caleb's hand slipped from hers. His head rolled slightly against the pillow. The green line above him jumped and stumbled, sharp peaks breaking into ugly rhythm. Dr. Shaw snapped orders from the far side of the bed, but Abby barely heard the words. Her body knew what to do. Increase fluids, check the line, watch the pressure. Find the bleed before the body lost the fight, Abby Shaw said. "I see it." She pressed 2 fingers to Caleb's neck. His pulse was there, thin and fast, like a thread being pulled through shaking hands. The nurse beside her hung another unit of blood. Hollis stood near the door, jaw tight, one hand pressed against his radio as if he could hold the room together by force. For once, he looked less like a man with answers and more like a man trapped by them. Caleb's eyelids fluttered. Abby leaned over him. "Stay with me." His lips parted, but no sound came out. "No," she said sharper now. "You do not get to drop a sentence like that and leave me with it." Dr. Shaw glanced at her. "What sentence?" Abby did not answer. "Your husband did not drown." Rourke knew the broken compass. The words moved through her skull with the cold precision of a blade. Nate had been dead for 5 years. Not officially dead at first. Missing. Presumed lost. Probable drowning. Words that sounded temporary until people began building paperwork around them. The Coast Guard reports, the insurance interviews, the salvage company letters, the funeral with no body and too many folded flags from men who had not known where to put their hands. Abby had survived that. Eli had survived it. Mara had survived it. They had all learned to live around an empty chair. Now, a wounded stranger. Maybe her brother, maybe a liar. Maybe both had reached out of a hospital bed and cracked the grave open. Caleb's pressure began to crawl upward. Not enough for now. Shaw watched the monitor, then Abby. "He is stabilizing." Abby kept her hands on the bed rail. "Good. You look like you might not be." "I am working." "That was not what I asked." She looked at him then. Shaw's face was tired, concerned, and too intelligent for comfort. Abby stepped back from the bed. "Call me if his pressure drops again." "Abby, call me." She left before he could stop her. The hallway felt too bright, too clean, too ordinary. People moved past with breakfast trays and clipboard soft shoes whispering over polished floors. Somewhere someone laughed near the elevators. The sound scraped against her nerves. Major Hollis followed her. She did not slow down. Mercer. She kept walking. Abby. That made her stop. She turned so quickly he nearly stepped into her. "Do not use my first name." His eyes held hers. "I need you calm. You need to stop needing things from me. There are pieces you do not understand. My husband did not drown." Hollis went still. Just for a second. It was enough. Abby felt the whole shape of the world change. "You knew," she said. Hollis did not answer quickly enough. She almost hit him. The thought came so cleanly that it frightened her. Not because she could not do it. Because she could. "My children buried their father," she said. "I watched my son stand at a service without a body and pretend he was not breaking. I watched my daughter save his voicemails because she was terrified she would forget the sound of him laughing. So, before you choose your next careful little sentence, understand something. I have spent 5 years living with the cost of whatever you people call silence." Hollis looked away first. Only for a moment. "He was burned," he said. Abby's chest tightened. "Nate." "Yes. What does that mean?" "It means his known life became dangerous." "To whom?" Hollis looked back at her. "To you." She stared at him. The hallway seemed to lengthen around them. "No," she said. "Abby." I said, do not. He stopped. She turned and walked away. This time, he did not follow. By the time Abby reached the locker room, her hands were shaking hard enough that she had to grip the edge of the sink. She looked at herself in the mirror. Gray eyes, pale face, blood at the edge of one sleeve, hair coming loose from a clip. A woman who had spent 3 decades telling families to breathe while their lives broke in front of them. She turned on the faucet and washed her hands until the water ran clear. Then she dried them, took the compass from her pocket and held it under the light. The needle still leaned away from north. When north breaks, listen. She closed her fingers around it. Fine, she whispered. Abby clocked out without remembering doing it. Outside, Wilmington had the washed-out look of a city after rain. The sky was low and gray over the Cape Fear River. Ship cranes stood dark in the distance. The streets near the hospital shone under passing tires. She drove home with both hands on the wheel, the radio off her phone, face down on the passenger seat because she could not bear the idea of hearing any voice she loved. Her house sat on a quiet street a few blocks from the water. A narrow white bungalow with blue shutters Nate had painted one summer and never finished touching up. The porch steps creaked under her weight. The ceramic planter by the rail still had a crack along one side from the day Nate had dropped it, while trying to prove he did not need help carrying soil. He had laughed then. Abby stood with her key in the lock and heard it so clearly that she almost turned around. Inside the house smelled like dust, coffee, and old wood. She did not turn on the overhead lights. She walked through the dim living room past the framed photographs she had stopped really seeing. Eli at graduation. Mara holding a fish too proudly at age 9. Nate on the beach with one hand raised to block the sun, his grin crooked and impatient. Dead men should not look that alive in photographs. Abby went to the hallway closet and pulled the attic ladder down. The sound cracked through the house. She climbed slowly. The attic was hot, despite the rain, the air thick with insulation dust and old cardboard. Boxes lined the wall where she had shoved them years ago. Wade Mercer's things. Nate's things. The things grief could not keep and could not throw away. She carried the first box downstairs, then the second, then a third. By the time she cut the tape on the first one, her living room floor looked like a small estate sale for ghosts. She started with Wade's box. Receipts. Engine manuals. An old cap from a marina in Beaufort. Fishing pliers wrapped in a stained rag. A stack of faded utility bills. Nothing that looked like a life inside a secret war. The second box held photographs. At first they were harmless. Wade beside an outboard motor squinting at the camera like he resented being preserved. Abby at 10 missing a front tooth holding a fish by the tail. Her mother in a yellow sundress sitting on a cooler smiling at someone outside the frame. Abby paused over that one. Her mother had known things. Maybe not everything, but enough. The memory of her standing at the kitchen sink returned again, that fixed stare into dark glass, that silence when Wade's truck was gone too long. Abby set the photo aside. Deeper in the stack, she found a marina invoice folded around something stiffer. A photograph slid out. It landed face up on the rug. Abby did not pick it up at first. Her body understood before her mind permitted it. The picture had been taken on a dock at dusk. The colors had faded into blue and rust, but the figures were clear enough. Wade stood near the center, younger than she remembered him at the end, broad-shouldered, one hand tucked into his jacket pocket. Beside him were 2 men. One had turned away from the camera. The other faced it just enough. Nate. Abby stopped breathing. Not Nate, as she had last seen him, tired around the eyes, wearing the old green rain jacket, kissing her cheek before leaving for a salvage contract near Cape Lookout. This Nate was younger, harder in the jaw, standing with weight balanced slightly forward as if waiting for something to happen. He wore a dark cap low on his brow. On the front of the cap was a small stitched symbol. A black compass rose with a white slash through the north point. Abby picked up the photo with numb fingers. Her father, her husband. The same dock, the same hidden mark. The room seemed to tilt. She turned the photograph over. No message, no names, only a faded date stamp from 11 years earlier. 6 years before Nate disappeared. 4 years before Wade died. Abby lowered herself onto the floor because her knees had stopped being trustworthy. She remembered the first time Nate met Wade. At least, the first time she thought they met. It had been a July afternoon, sticky and bright. Nate had come to dinner wearing a clean shirt and the nervous smile of a man trying too hard. Wade had shaken his hand, looked him over, and said, "You work near water." Nate had laughed. "Most people around here do." Wade had held his gaze a second too long. "Not like you." At the time, Abby had thought it was one of her father's odd little tests. Now, the memory rearranged itself into something colder. She set the photograph on the coffee table with too much care. The third box held papers. Most were dull. Tax forms, insurance letters, receipts for parts. Then, under an engine manual, Abby found a bundle tied with fishing line. No stamps, no return addresses, plain envelopes, her father's name written on the front in block capitals. She untied the fishing line. The first note was short. Delay, South Inlet, weather cover holds. The second, use the white hull, no names at dock. The third, Rourke clean. Mercer channel quiet. Abby stared at the words. Rourke clean. Not Nate, Rourke. A useful name. A file name. A man reduced to function. She opened another envelope. This one held a page from a motel notepad. The handwriting was rushed. If Rourke misses Friday check-in, assume breach. Do not bring family near water. Tell W the northern copy is compromised. Abby read it again. Then again. She stood too fast and crossed into the kitchen, pressing both hands against the sink. Rain tapped lightly against the window above the counter. Outside, the back fence was dark with water. The neighbor's porch light glowed through the branches of the magnolia tree. Everything looked exactly as it always had. That was the cruelty of it. Nothing outside changed when the truth arrived. Her phone rang. The sound made her flinch. Eli. She stared at his name on the screen, then answered. "Hey, Mom," he said. "You awake?" His voice was ordinary. Warm, distracted, alive. Abby closed her eyes. "I am. You still have that blue casserole dish Mara says I stole it, and I would like the record to show I steal only food, not cookware." Abby looked at the photograph on the coffee table. Nate on the dock. Nate in the cab. Nate inside a world he had never admitted existed. "I have it," she said. "You sound weird." Long shift. "You always say that when something is wrong." She swallowed. Eli had been 24 when Nate disappeared, old enough to understand procedures, young enough to still look at the door when trucks passed the house at night. He had worn Nate's old watch to the memorial. He had not cried where anyone could see. "Are you home?" Abby asked. "Yeah." Grading essays. Slowly losing faith in public education. "Lock your door." There was a pause. "What?" "Lock it." "Mom." "Eli." He heard it then. The thing beneath her voice. "Okay," he said quietly. "It is locked. Check the windows. Are you going to tell me why?" "Not yet." "Is this about Dad?" The question moved through the line and into the kitchen like a living thing. Abby gripped the phone. "Why would you ask that?" Another pause. Too long. "Some guy came by the school today," Eli said. Gray windbreaker, maybe 50s. Asked if I was Nathan Rourke's son. Abby's vision narrowed. "What did you say?" "Not much. I thought maybe he knew Dad from salvage work. He said he had served with him once. I told him I was late for class. Did he follow you?" "I do not think so." "You do not think so? Mom, what is going on?" Abby looked toward the living room, at the photo, at the notes, at the compass. "I need you to stay inside tonight," she said. "If anyone knocks, you do not open the door. If anyone calls asking about your father, you say nothing and call me. Mom, promise me." His voice changed. Less son, more man. "I promise." "Where is Mara?" "She had lab late. She was going to stop by her friend's place after." Abby closed her eyes. "I will call her." "Mom, you are scaring me." "I know," she said. The honesty slipped out before she could stop it. Eli went silent. Then he said, "Are you safe?" Abby looked at the dark window over the sink. For a second, she thought she saw movement beyond the fence. "I am home," she said. "That is not what I asked." She almost smiled and the effort hurt. "I know." After she hung up, she called Mara. No answer. She called again. Voicemail. "Mara, it is Mom. Call me when you get this. Do not stop anywhere alone. Go straight inside wherever you're going, lock the door, and call me." She set the phone on the counter and pressed both hands over her mouth. For 30 years in trauma, Abby had learned the difference between fear and action. Fear widened everything. Action narrowed it. She needed narrow. She moved through the house, closing blinds. Front room, kitchen, hallway, bedroom. She checked the back door, then checked it again. In the living room, she gathered the photograph, the notes, the compass, and the motel stationery into a stack. A knock sounded at the front door. Not loud, not urgent. 3 controlled taps. Abby froze. The house seemed to hold its breath. She picked up the heavy flashlight from the side table and moved quietly to the door. "Who is it?" "Grant Hollis." His voice came through the wood, low and even. Abby did not open it right away. "Show me your hands through the side window." A pause. Then his silhouette shifted. Through the narrow glass beside the door, she saw him raise both hands, palms out. Only then did she undo the lock. Hollis stood on the porch in a dark jacket, rain shining in his hair. He looked past her shoulder and saw the papers spread across the living room. His eyes settled on the photograph. "You found Rourke." Abby felt something inside her go cold. "You knew." "I knew there was overlap. Do not use clean words for dirty things." He stepped inside only when she moved back. She shut the door and locked it. Hollis looked at the photo again. "Where did you find it?" "In my house, which seems to have more federal secrets than my hospital." He did not react. Abby held up the motel note. "If Rourke misses Friday check and assume breach, do not bring family near water. Tell W the northern copy is compromised." Hollis's jaw tightened. That note should have been destroyed. Apparently my father was bad at closure. Wade kept insurance. So did Nate. Hollis looked at her. "Nate kept you alive." The words hit too close. Abby stepped toward him. "My children mourned him. I know." "No, you do not get to say that like a priest. You did not hold my daughter while she screamed into a towel because she did not want her brother to hear. You did not watch Eli clean out his father's truck without saying a word. You did not sleep on Nate's side of the bed because the empty space felt louder than the floor." Hollis took it. All of it. When he spoke, his voice was lower. "Nate disappeared because after the breach, his known life became a route to you." Breach. A recovery operation off Cape Lookout. Something from an old archive was moving. Names, routes, payments, family contacts. Nate was sent to intercept the handoff. Someone fed him bad coordinates. Someone on your side. Hollis did not answer. That was answer enough. Abby's phone buzzed on the counter. She grabbed it. "Mara. Mom." Her daughter's voice sounded breathless. "I got your message." "Where are you?" "In my car, near the marina." "Why?" "Do not go home. Go to Claire's apartment. Stay on the phone with me." "What happened?" Hollis stepped closer, listening. Abby turned away from him. "Mara, just drive." There was a faint rush of traffic through the line. Then Mara said quieter, "There is a truck behind me that has made the last 3 turns." Abby's hand tightened around the phone. Hollis was already moving toward the window. "What color?" Abby asked. "Dark, maybe black. I cannot see the plate. Do not speed. Do not pull over. Keep driving toward Market Street." Hollis spoke into his radio voice, clipped and controlled. Abby could hear Mara breathing. Then her daughter whispered, "Mom, is this about Dad?" Abby looked at the photograph of Nate on the dock, the broken compass on his cap, and the life she had buried without a body. "Yes," she said. The word changed everything. From the front room, Hollis turned sharply from the window. Abby followed his gaze. Across the street, under the dull orange street lamp, a dark sedan sat with its lights off. It had not been there when Hollis arrived. Her phone buzzed again. Another call waiting. "Eli." Abby answered with Mara still on the other line, her heart kicking hard against her ribs. Eli's voice came through the phone, low and tight. "Mom, that car outside my apartment is back." Abby stood in her own living room with Mara, breathing hard on one line, Eli frightened on the other, and Grant Hollis at her window with one hand against his radio. The house felt too small for all the danger entering it. The rain against the glass sounded soft, almost gentle, as if the night had no idea what it was carrying. "Eli," Abby said, forcing her voice flat. "Step away from the window." "I am not at the window." "Good. Lock your bedroom door, too." "Mom, I live alone." "Then there is no one to complain." She heard him move. A floorboard creaked. Somewhere on his end a lock turned. "Mara," Abby said, switching her focus without letting go of either child. "Are you still driving?" "Yes." "Tell me where." "Market Street." "Passing the pharmacy." Hollis snapped something into his radio too low for Abby to catch. His face had changed. Not panic. Calculation. The kind men wore when all the exits had numbers in their heads. Abby hated that he looked useful. Mara, Hollis said, stepping close enough for the phone to pick him up. "Do not go to your friend's apartment. Turn into the hospital parking deck. Level 3. Stay in the car until someone approaches from the driver's side and gives you the word Tidewater." Mara went silent. Abby turned on him. "No." Hollis did not look away. "It is controlled ground. My daughter is not walking into your controlled ground. She is already in uncontrolled ground." That landed too cleanly. Abby closed her eyes for 1 second. Mara do exactly what he said. "Mom, who is that?" "A man I currently hate but need." Hollis accepted that without blinking. Mara's voice shook. "Is Eli okay?" "I'm fine," Eli said from the other line, and Abby realized both calls had merged into one mess of fear and static and breathing. He did not sound fine. He sounded like the boy who used to stand in the hallway after nightmares trying to decide if he was too old to wake his mother. Abby lowered her voice. "Listen to me, both of you. No one answers the door. No one talks to strangers. No one says your father's name to anyone who asks." Eli said, "Dad is dead." The words struck the room like a thrown object. Abby looked at the photograph on her table. Nate on the dock. Nate in the cap with the broken compass. Nate standing beside Wade as if he had belonged to the secret long before he belonged to her. She could not say it yet. Not over the phone. Not with unknown cars sitting in the dark outside her children's homes. "I know what you believe," she said. Eli heard the shape of the answer. "Mom, stay inside." Hollis moved away from the window. "The sedan is leaving." Abby pulled the curtain back an inch. Across the street, the dark car rolled forward without headlights, coasted past the end of the block, then turned right. No rush. No squeal of tires. A patient exit. That scared her more. "Is it gone?" Eli asked. For now is not comforting." "No," Abby said, "it is not." Mara's voice came through next. "I'm entering the parking deck." Hollis lifted the radio. "Gray Honda, level 3 east ramp. Confirm visual." A voice answered in static. Hollis listened, then said, "Mara, keep your hands visible. A woman in a navy jacket is coming toward your car. She will say Tidewater. You go with her." Abby could hear the turn signal clicking in Mara's car. Small and ordinary, it nearly broke her. "Mom," Mara whispered, "tell me something true." Abby gripped the phone. "I love you. That is not enough. It is the truest thing I have that will not get you hurt." The line went quiet except for Mara's breathing. Then a woman's voice sounded faintly through the phone. "Tidewater." Mara exhaled. "Okay, I see her." "Go," Abby said. "I love you." "I love you too." The call clicked, leaving only Eli. He said nothing for several seconds. Then, "You are going to tell me what is happening." "Yes." "When?" "When I can do it without putting a target on your chest." Eli laughed once, short and bitter. That sentence did not make me feel better. It was not built for comfort. "You sound like Grandpa." Abby's eyes moved to Wade's compass. For once, she did not know whether that hurt because it was true or because it was unfair. "I need you to pack a small bag," she said. "Medication, charger, Cash if you have it. Do not leave yet. Someone may come get you. Someone like him. Eli meant Hollis. Abby knew it. Someone I approve. Do you approve him? Abby looked at Hollis. No. For the first time that night, Hollis almost looked amused. But I believe him enough for the next 10 minutes, she added. That is a low bar. It is the bar we have. After she ended the call, Abby stood in the middle of her living room and let the silence press around her. Her children were alive. Not safe. Alive. In the ER, alive was sometimes the only word that mattered. Hollis lowered his radio. Mara is secure. Eli has eyes on his building. No contact. Abby looked at him. You had people near them already. Yes. You were watching my children before I knew they were in danger. Yes. The word was plain, almost brutal. Abby stepped toward him. If you ever again decide that my family is safer because I am ignorant, I will make you regret underestimating what a nurse can do with a scalpel. Hollis held her stare. I believe you. Good. His radio crackled again. This time, the voice on the other end carried enough urgency for Abby to feel it before she understood it. Hollis turned slightly. Repeat. Static. Then the words came clear. Room 416 is empty. Abby froze. Hollis's face lost all expression. Say that again. Patient is gone. Guard down, no sign of forced extraction. Abby was already moving. Hollis caught her at the door. You are not driving angry. She pulled free. I drive angry better than most people drive rested. Mercer. She turned. My patient is 12 hours out of surgery and bleeding internally. If Caleb Rowe is out of that hospital, he is either dying or being killed. Pick which one you want me calm about. Hollis did not stop her again. They drove back to Port Providence Medical Center through wet streets and thin dawn light. Hollis drove. Abby sat in the passenger seat with her medical bag in her lap and one hand closed around the compass in her pocket. The city outside looked bruised by rain. Traffic lights blinked over empty intersections. The river was dark beyond the buildings. At the hospital, Hollis took her through a service entrance. No main lobby. No security desk. No waiting room full of tired families and vending machine coffee. The back corridors smelled of bleach and old air. By the time they reached the 4th floor, room 416 had become a crime scene nobody was allowed to call a crime scene. 2 federal officers stood outside. One had a split lip and a swelling bruise near his temple. The bed inside was stripped halfway. One IV pole had been knocked over. A smear of blood marked the tile near the bathroom door. Abby stepped into the room. Her nurse brain took over. Not much blood. Not a catastrophic bleed in the room. No pooling. No drag marks. The patient had either walked or been supported. The dressing on the bed was stained through but not soaked enough for a fatal event. She checked the trash. Gauze, tape, packaging, a torn hospital bracelet. Then she saw it. A strip of white medical tape stuck to the inside of the trash liner. Letters written in dark marker. Ocracoke. Room 9, North Breaks. Abby lifted it carefully. Hollis, Tyler, stood behind her. He left that for you. For us. No, Abby said. For me. She felt the difference in her bones. Shaw entered the room, hair rumpled, face hard. Tell me you people did not lose my surgical patient. Hollis said nothing. Shaw looked at Abby. Please tell me you did not lose your surgical patient. Abby held up the tape. He left. Shaw's eyes widened. He cannot leave. He has a fresh abdominal repair and the survival instincts of a raccoon in traffic. That is generous, Abby said. Shaw turned to Hollis. Find him. Hollis answered quietly. We are trying. Shaw took one step closer. Try faster. Abby almost appreciated him for that. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered without speaking. For a moment there was only wind. Then a breath uneven and strained. Abby. Caleb. She turned away from the room. Where are you? Bad first question. Wrong. The first question is whether I can keep you alive. Location helps. A weak sound came through the line, almost a laugh. House. What house? Yours. Abby closed her eyes. Hollis was watching her now. Caleb's breath hitched. Back door. Sorry about the lock. You broke into my house. Technically, I bled into it. Caleb. Bring the compass. The line went dead. Abby lowered the phone. Hollis said, Where is he? My house. His eyes sharpened. That could be a trap. So could this hospital. Mercer. He is my patient. And maybe your brother. She looked at him. That word has not earned a place yet. They left through the same service corridor. Hollis did not argue this time. He made 3 radio calls, changed vehicles once, and drove a route that made no sense to Abby until she realized he was checking for tails. Twice he went past turns he should have taken. Once he pulled into a gas station and left without stopping. Abby watched the mirrors. She hated how quickly she began to understand the habit. When they reached her street, the rain had thinned into mist. The house looked still. Curtains closed. Porch damp. Blue shutters peeling near the top where Nate had once promised to repaint them. Hollis drew a weapon before opening his door. Abby grabbed her medical bag. He looked at her. Stay behind me. No. This is not a hospital. My house. My rules. She walked up the porch before he could answer. The front door was locked. Inside, nothing moved. She entered with the spare key, Hollis close behind. The living room was dim. Papers still lay on the table. The photograph of Nate and Wade sat exactly where she had left it. But the air had changed. It held the faint metallic scent Abby knew better than perfume. Blood. Caleb, she called. A voice answered from the kitchen. You sound mad. She found him sitting on the floor beside the cabinets back against the lower doors, one hand pressed hard to his side. He had stolen a hospital blanket and wrapped it around his shoulders. His face was gray with pain. Sweat darkened his hairline. Blood had soaked through the front of his borrowed shirt. Abby dropped beside him. You absolute idiot. He opened one eye. Family resemblance. Do not try to be charming while actively hemorrhaging. Was not confident I was succeeding. She pulled the blanket away and cut open his shirt with trauma shears from her bag. Hollis checked the back door, then the hallway, then returned with his weapon lowered but ready. He came alone, Hollis said. Abby did not look up. You sound disappointed. I sound unconvinced. Caleb winced as Abby peeled back the bandage. The wound was angry. The sutures still held, but a vessel along the edge had opened. Fresh bleeding, not enough to kill him instantly, more than enough to punish every bad decision he had made getting there. How long were you moving? Abby asked. Depends how you define moving. I define it as the thing you should not have done, then too long. She pressed gauze against the wound. He hissed through his teeth. Good, she said. Pain means you are still available for criticism. Caleb breathed shallowly. Kitchen floor, warm welcome. You are lucky I do not staple you to it. His mouth twitched. Hollis crouched nearby. Why leave the hospital? Caleb's gaze moved to him. Because one of your guards let the wrong man close enough to ask questions. Hollis went still. Describe him. Gray windbreaker, scar above left eyebrow. Asked if I had delivered the Mercer line. Abby's hands paused for half a second. That is the man who approached Eli. Caleb looked at her, the pain briefly giving way to alarm. He got to your son. He spoke to him. Caleb closed his eyes. Then we are late. Abby pressed harder. He groaned. No, you are bleeding on my floor. You are not allowed to be cryptic. Caleb reached inside his jacket with shaking fingers. Hollis raised his weapon a fraction. Abby snapped, do not. Caleb slowly pulled out an old brass key and dropped it onto the tile. Then a second key, a plastic motel tag worn almost blank. Room 9. Ocracoke. Abby stared at them. What are these? Caleb swallowed. The motel key gets you to the first marker. The brass key opens the safe house. Hollis's voice was tight. Which safe house? Caleb looked at Abby, not him. The one where Nathan Rourke has been dead for 5 years. The kitchen seemed to lose its air. Abby heard the refrigerator humming. rain tapping at the back window. Hollis breathing once controlled and slow. She looked down at Caleb. Say it plainly. He held her gaze. Nate is alive. The world did not explode. That was the strange thing. The walls stayed where they were. The sink, the cabinets, the cracked tile near the back door Nate had once said he would replace. The same kitchen where Abby had made school lunches, paid bills, cried without sound at 2 in the morning because grief was less dangerous when the children slept. All of it remained. And Nate was alive. Abby sat back on her heels. For a moment she could not feel her hands. Hollis said softly, Caleb. Caleb's eyes flicked to him. She had to hear it from blood, he said. Not from another sealed mouth. Abby stood. The room swayed once, then steadied. Where? Caleb pushed the brass key with 2 fingers. South of Ocracoke. Cottage near the dunes. No address that matters. Wade used it first. Nate after. Hollis rose. If Rourke is there, he is compromised now. He was compromised the day he loved her, Caleb said. Abby turned on him. Do not make poetry out of my marriage. Caleb lowered his eyes. Sorry. The apology was quiet enough to be real. Abby looked at Hollis. You knew he was alive. Hollis did not deny it. I knew there was a high probability. She almost laughed. A high probability. I did not have confirmed location. You let my children mourn a probability. Hollis absorbed the words without defense. Yes, she wanted to break something, a glass, a chair, his calm face. Instead, she grabbed fresh gauze and tape. Caleb cannot travel like this. Caleb said I can. Abby looked down at him. You cannot make it from my kitchen to the porch without leaving half your blood behind. I made it from the hospital, and I am still angry about that. Hollis glanced toward the front room. We move him to a secure facility. Then we approach Rourke with a team. Caleb shook his head. No team. Hollis's jaw tightened. You are not directing this. The safe house watches for teams. Rourke runs if he sees your shape coming. Abby began packing her kit. Then he sees mine. Hollis turned. No. Abby did not stop moving. Yes, you are exhausted, emotionally compromised, and not trained for field contact. She faced him. I am a trauma nurse who has worked 32 years in rooms where men with guns, knives, addictions, secrets, and regrets bleed on me while everyone else argues about authority. Do not confuse my lack of camouflage with lack of training. Hollis said nothing. Caleb gave the faintest smile from the floor. She gets that from Wade. Abby pointed at him without looking. You are 1 sentence from no pain medication. The smile vanished. She changed Caleb's dressing, taped it tight, gave him fluids from a portable bag, and waited until some color returned to his face. Not enough. Enough to move. Hollis made calls Abby was not invited to hear. She called Eli and Mara. Eli answered on the first ring. Mom, I am okay. You never lead with that unless something is very not okay. I need you to stay with the people Hollis sent. I do not know Hollis. Neither do I. That is where we are. Are you coming here? Not yet. Why? Abby looked toward the brass key on the counter. Because I have to find out whether the dead can explain themselves. Eli went silent. Mom, I love you. Keep your phone on. She called Mara next. Her daughter answered from a secure office somewhere inside the hospital, angry enough to sound steady. Eli told me the man came back. Yes. Is Dad alive? Abby closed her eyes. Mara had always known how to place the blade directly on the truth. I do not know enough to answer you the way you deserve. That is an answer. I am sorry. Mom, if he is alive, do not protect me from it. Abby looked at the kitchen where Caleb was trying not to pass out and Hollis was pretending not to listen. I am trying to stop protecting people with silence, she said. Mara's voice softened, but only a little. Then come back. I will try. Do better than try. Abby smiled painfully. That is my girl. By the time they left, the sky had shifted from gray to a darker evening blue. The day had passed in broken pieces swallowed by emergency calls, hidden vehicles, and the slow preparation of people who expected violence but did not name it aloud. Hollis refused to let Abby take her own car. She refused to let Caleb leave without her medical bag within reach. They compromised in the ugliest way possible. Abby drove her SUV because Nate would recognize it if he watched the approach. Hollis followed at distance with men Abby did not see but felt in the road behind her. Caleb rode in the passenger seat, pale and silent, one hand pressed to his side. The highway east cut through marshland and black water. Night gathered slowly. Rain clouds dragged low over the coast. Headlights stretched across wet pavement. The further they drove, the more the land thinned, as if the world were being reduced to road salt and consequence. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Abby said, "Did Nate know who I was when we met?" Caleb stared ahead. Not at first. She waited. He knew Wade had a daughter in Wilmington. He did not know you were her. Not until after. After what? After he had already fallen in love. Her hands tightened on the wheel. That is a beautiful way to describe lying. I am not defending him. You are explaining him. Sometimes those look too close. Abby breathed through her nose. Did my father know? Yes. The answer was immediate. It hurt more for that. Did he warn Nate away? Yes. And Nate stayed? Yes. The wipers swept rain from the windshield in a steady rhythm. Abby thought of Nate at her kitchen table, helping Eli build a model boat for school. Nate holding Mara in the ocean when she was little, telling her waves were only scary until you learned when to jump. Nate coming home tired and quiet, standing in the shower too long after certain jobs, saying the sea had been rough. The sea. Always the sea. What kind of man lets his family bury him? She asked. Caleb did not answer quickly. One who thinks grief is safer than leverage. Abby's eyes burned. Do not say that like it makes sense. It does not make it right. No, it only means he was afraid in a way men like him are trained not to admit. Abby glanced at him. And you? Caleb looked out at the dark line of trees beyond the road. I was trained to deliver things. People. Files. Messages. Sometimes warnings. I got good at arriving too late. That was the first thing he had said that sounded less like an operative and more like a man. Abby let the silence stand. Near Ocracoke, the road narrowed. The Atlantic appeared in flashes beyond the dunes, black and restless under a moon hidden by cloud. Caleb guided her off the main road onto a sand-packed track between scrub and seagrass. The SUV rocked over ruts. Hollis's headlights disappeared far behind them. He is hanging back, Abby said. He should. Will Nate run? If he sees a team, yes. If he sees me. Caleb turned his head toward her. I do not know what a ghost does when the person he haunted opens the door. Abby said nothing. The cottage appeared as if it had been assembled out of weather. Gray boards, low roof, dark windows. No mailbox, no porch light. Beyond it, the ocean moved like a black animal against the shore. Abby stopped the SUV. For a moment, she could not move. Caleb opened his door slowly, fighting pain with every breath. She came around to help him. Do not pretend you can walk unaided. I was not pretending well anyway. They crossed the sand together. The brass key was cold in Abby's hand. Before she reached the door, she noticed it was already unlocked. Of course it was. Men like Wade and Nate had always trusted danger more when they could hear it entering. Abby pushed the door open. Inside, the cottage smelled like coffee salt, damp wood gun oil, and loneliness. A table stood near the front window. Charts covered one side. A radio unit sat beside a metal case. A wool blanket lay folded over the arm of a chair. In the sink, one cup rested with coffee stains dried along the rim. A floorboard creaked in the back room. Caleb whispered Abby. A man stepped into the hallway. Older, leaner, gray at the temples, a scar near his hairline. Alive. Nathan Rourke stopped with one hand against the doorframe as if his own body had forgotten how to stand under the weight of being seen. His eyes found Abby. Abby, he said. She crossed the room and slapped him hard across the face. The sound cracked through the cottage. Nate took the blow without raising a hand. Abby stood inches from him, shaking with 5 years of grief that had just learned where to put its teeth. You do not get hello, she said. The slap left a red mark across Nate Rourke's face. He did not touch it. He did not step back. That made Abby angrier. Some part of her had wanted him to defend himself, to flinch, to look offended, to give her one clean reason to hate him without complication. Instead, he stood there in the dim cottage light with 5 years of absence carved into his face, and let her rage land where it belonged. His eyes were wet. Not enough to save him. Not enough to soften anything. "You do not get hello," Abby said again, quieter this time. "You do not get relief. You do not get to look at me like I came home late." Nate swallowed. "I know." "No," she said. "You know you disappeared. You know you made a choice. You know the language men like you use to make cowardice sound tactical. But you do not know what it was like after." Caleb shifted behind her, one hand braced against the back of a chair. His face had gone gray again, but Abby did not look away from Nate. Not yet. "You do not know Eli standing in your jacket after the memorial because it still smelled like you. You do not know Mara playing your old voicemail over and over in the bathroom because she was afraid she would forget your laugh. You do not know what it cost me to sign forms for a dead man with no body, while everyone kept saying closure like it was a gift they could hand me." Nate's mouth tightened. I watched from farther away than I should have. The sentence struck her wrong. Her hand came up again, but this time she stopped herself. "You watched." His face folded under the word. Not always, not close, never enough to risk a pattern. Abby gave a soft laugh that had no humor in it. "A pattern. I kept eyes when I could." Eyes, she repeated. Not arms. Not a voice. Not a father at the door when his children were falling apart. Nate looked past her for a second toward the window and the black ocean beyond it. "When I was burned, the first search went straight to our house." "Our house?" "Yes. You mean my house. The house where your children slept while strangers were looking for you." He nodded once. "I mean that house." The honesty made it worse because it did not fight back. Caleb's breathing hitched. Abby turned at once. He had lowered himself into the chair, but his hand was pressed hard to his side. Blood darkened the front of his shirt through the bandage she had placed earlier. Nate saw it too and moved instinctively. "He needs to lie down." Abby snapped her gaze back to him. "You do not get to give medical opinions in front of me." "I was not trying to." "Then get towels." For half a second, Nate looked almost like the man who had once stood in her kitchen and obeyed when she told him to grab a mop after the sink backed up. Then he moved. Fast. Efficient. He opened a cabinet and pulled out clean towels, a first aid case, and a sealed package of gauze that had no business being in an abandoned cottage unless someone had planned for blood. Of course he had. Men like Nate did not live in houses. They lived inside contingency plans. Abby guided Caleb down to the rug near the kitchen island. He tried to help and failed badly. "Stop moving," she said. "I am on the floor. You are still finding ways to be difficult." Caleb's lips twitched. "I hear it runs in the family." "Not now." Nate knelt nearby with the supplies. Abby cut open Caleb's shirt again and peeled back the dressing. The wound had reopened along one edge. Not catastrophic yet. Dangerous enough. His skin was cold and damp. His pulse was too fast. "Hold this," she told Nate. He placed both hands where she indicated and pressed down. Caleb sucked air through his teeth. "Sorry," Nate said. Caleb looked up at him through pain. "You look worse than your photograph." Nate blinked. Abby looked at Caleb. "Do not bond while bleeding." Caleb closed his eyes. "Just making observations." Abby packed fresh gauze and taped the dressing tight. Her hands steadied because they had work. Blood and pressure made more sense than husbands returning from the dead. When she finished, she sat back on her heels and looked at Nate. "Talk." Nate stayed crouched beside Caleb for a moment, his hands still red. He looked at them as if the blood had reminded him of something he had spent years trying not to touch. Then he stood. "There is coffee." Abby stared at him. "If you offer me coffee before answers, I will put you through that window." He nodded. "Fair." He crossed to the table and picked up a metal case from beneath a folded chart. The case was old military green scuffed at the corners with a salt stain along one hinge. He set it on the table but did not open it. Your father copied part of an archive before he died. My father fixed engines. He did. He also moved people documents, equipment, and money through coastal routes that were never supposed to appear in official records. I have heard the brochure. Nate looked at her. Wade was not the worst of them. That is not the defense you think it is. I know. Outside, wind pushed against the cottage walls. The boards answered with a low groan. Abby could smell salt through a crack near the window. Nate rested one hand on the case. The compartment started as recovery support. Old operations. Bad weather extractions. Things that could not wait for clean paperwork. Over time, the wrong men realized unrecorded routes could move more than people. Money? Yes. Weapons? Sometimes. Bodies? Nate's silence answered. Abby's stomach tightened, and Wade stayed. For too long. That sounds familiar. Nate looked down. She hated that he let that land too. He started copying proof when he understood the operation had turned inward. Names, payment chains, old mission covers, family contact routes, leverage points, the kind of information powerful men keep only until someone else finds it first. Caleb spoke from the floor voice thin. He split it. Nate looked at him. You should not be talking. Caleb's eyes stayed closed. I have been told. Abby looked between them. Split it where Nate opened the case. Inside were sealed envelopes wrapped in plastic. A waterproof flash drive, old photographs, folded maps, and a field notebook swollen from salt air. The pages looked warped but intact. One fragment went through Lillian Rowe, Nate said. Caleb's mother. One was hidden through Wade's Wilmington line. Abby's jaw tightened, meaning me, near you. Not with you, at least not knowingly. That distinction is for men who lie. Nate accepted it. The third came through me. Abby stared at the contents of the case. This was what had hollowed out her life. Not a rival, not an accident, not the sea. Paper, names, codes, old sins folded in waterproof sleeves. What happened 5 years ago, she asked. Nate's face changed. The change was small, but Abby saw it. His eyes went flatter. His shoulders settled. The man in front of her became less husband and more survivor. There was a handoff near Cape Lookout after a storm. I was told a courier had part of the archive and wanted out. My job was to intercept, verify, and move him inland. Who sent you? A channel I trusted. You trusted wrong. Yes, the word came out raw. When I arrived, the coordinates were bad. There was no courier. Just 2 boats running dark and men waiting in the rain. My comms were jammed within 30 seconds. The first man with me died before I reached the dock. The second made it to the rocks and bled out before extraction. Abby did not move. Nate's eyes stayed on the case. I took a round across the ribs and went into the water. That probably saved me. They thought the current got me. By the time I crawled out south of the inlet, my face was already on internal alerts. My house was flagged. My known family was flagged. Abby's voice was barely above a whisper. So you let us bury you. His eyes lifted to hers. I let the world believe the lie before the men who set the trap could decide whether the lie was useful. You did not answer me. His throat moved. Yes, I let you bury me. The room held still around that. No apology could fit there. No explanation could clean it. Abby looked at the man she had loved, hated, mourned, and now had to keep from becoming a stranger too completely. You should have trusted me. I know. No, you do not get to agree like that ends it. It does not. I would have helped you. That is why I could not tell you. Her anger flashed hot. Do not call that love. Nate looked at her with the worst kind of tenderness. The kind that had no defense left. I called it triage. Abby stepped closer. You are not allowed to use my language to excuse your wound. I am not excusing it. Then what are you doing? Standing here. His voice broke slightly on the last word. For the first time, Abby saw the years in him not as absence, but as a place he had been trapped. The cottage, the maps, the single coffee cup, the radio, the narrow bed visible through the back doorway with one blanket folded tight enough to pass inspection. A life reduced to vigilance. It did not forgive him, but it made the hatred less clean. That made her furious all over again. A flash of light moved across the curtains. Nate turned before Abby registered it. His entire body changed. Not startled. Activated. Down, he said. The first shot shattered the front window. Glass burst inward in a bright, violent spray. Abby dropped by instinct and pulled Caleb with her. He cried out as the movement tore through his wound. Nate moved low toward the table, yanked open a drawer, and came up with a pistol. A second burst tore through the wall above the kitchen counter. Wood splintered. A mug exploded near the sink. Rain and ocean wind rushed through the broken window. Abby dragged Caleb behind the kitchen island. "Stay flat," he gasped. "That was the plan. Your plans are terrible." She pressed one hand against his bandage. Fresh warmth spread under her palm. Nate fired twice through the shattered window, then moved along the wall and killed the lamp with one quick motion. The room fell into a darker gray, lit only by the thin coastal dawn and muzzle flashes outside. A voice shouted from beyond the porch. Abby could not make out the words. More shots punched through the doorframe. Caleb tried to push himself up. "No," Abby snapped. "I can help. You can bleed quietly." Nate slid into cover near the end of the island. "How bad?" Abby pulled the dressing open just enough to check. "Bad enough that I am irritated. That means if he keeps moving, he dies. If he stays still, I get to keep insulting him." Caleb breathed through clenched teeth. Motivating. Another shot cracked through the back window. Nate's head turned. 2 points, maybe 3. Abby reached into her bag, tore open gauze with her teeth, and packed pressure along the reopened edge. Her world narrowed to blood, skin, pulse, breath. Gunfire became weather. Fear became background noise. Her hands knew the center of the room even when the room itself was coming apart. Nate fired again. Outside tires ground in sand. The attackers were moving. Not random, not panicked, controlled advance. Men used to violence. Nate crouched beside Abby long enough to reload. "There is a floor hatch in the hall closet." She looked up at him. "Of course there is. If I say go, you take him. If you say go, I decide whether it is medically stupid." His mouth almost moved. Almost. The radio on the table burst into static. Nate looked at it. A voice cut through. "Rourke. Answer." Nate grabbed the mic and kept low. "Hollis. Status. House is taking fire. 2 vehicles. 4 to 6 shooters. Hold." Nate laughed, once sharp and breathless. "Great strategy." Hollis's voice came back clipped and cold. 30 seconds. Make it 20. A round hit the table, splintering wood near the metal case. Abby saw one of the envelopes slide toward the edge. The archive. The thing people had killed for. The thing Nate had died for without dying. The thing Wade had hidden inside family names like a coward or a prophet, depending on which wound was speaking. The case tipped. Abby lunged with one hand and shoved it back across the table without letting go of Caleb's bandage. Nate saw. For 1 second, their eyes met. Then gunfire answered from outside in a heavier rhythm. Not from the attackers, from behind them. Engines roared across the sand. Men shouted. The cottage shook with overlapping bursts. One attacker screamed. Tires spun, digging into wet sand. A vehicle reversed too hard and struck something wooden with a crack that sounded like a tree breaking. Nate stayed still, weapon up. Abby kept a pressure on Caleb's wound and counted his breaths. 1, 2, 3. Still with her. The gunfire thinned, then stopped. The silence that followed was enormous. It rang in the broken glass in Abby's ears in the space between Nate's breathing and Caleb's. Nate did not lower the pistol. He waited. 5 seconds. 10. Wind moved through the shattered window. Boots hit the porch. A voice called Hollis. Coming in. Nate kept the weapon angled down but ready. The door opened. Major Grant Hollis entered with 2 armed men behind him. His eyes swept the room once. Broken glass. Bullet holes. Nate alive, Caleb bleeding. Abby crouched with blood up both wrists. Hollis swore under his breath. It was the first honest thing Abby had heard him say. "You brought a team," Nate said. Hollis looked at him. "You brought a war to a cottage." "I did not invite them." "No, you only made yourself easy to find." Nate's jaw tightened. Abby cut across them. "If either of you plans to measure guilt, do it after my patient stops trying to die." Hollis immediately crouched beside her. "Can he move?" "Not far, not fast. Not unless your medical plan includes prayer and a shovel." One of Hollis's men called from outside that the perimeter was clear for the moment. "For the moment," Abby muttered. Everyone loves that phrase today. Hollis looked at Caleb's wound. "You need more supplies. I need a monitored trauma bay, 2 units of blood, an OR on standby, and everyone in this room to stop making decisions with bullet holes in them." Nate went to the back room and returned with another medical case. Abby opened it. Sterile packs, IV fluids, clotting gauze, antibiotics, pain medication, sutures. She looked up at him. "You have a hospital in a box. I had a nurse in my life once." The line was too soft, too close. She looked away before it could enter. "Then you know to shut up while she works." She inserted an IV, started fluids, reinforced the dressing, checked Caleb's pulse again and again, until it stopped slipping under her fingers. Hollis's medic arrived and knelt opposite her. He was young, steady, and smart enough to listen. "Pressure here," Abby said. "Not there." The lower edge reopened. "The repair may still be intact, but if he moves like an idiot again, I am writing that on his chart." Caleb's eyes opened halfway. "I object." Denied. The medic almost smiled. Together, they brought the bleeding under control. Not stopped. Controlled. Abby had lived her whole professional life in that narrow difference. When Caleb's breathing evened out, Abby sat back and felt her own exhaustion arrive like a second body. Her hands were red. Again. Nate stood near the table, one hand on the metal case. Hollis saw it. "You still have the fragment." Nate's face hardened. "Part of it." Hollis stepped closer. "If that goes through official channels, it disappears. If it stays here, they keep coming." Caleb spoke from the floor, eyes closed. "They came because someone knows the line activated. They do not know how much she has." Abby looked at him. "She." Caleb opened his eyes. "You." "No." The word came out automatically. All 3 men looked at her. Abby stood slowly. "No," she repeated. "Do not put my name at the center because Wade hid things, Nate lied, and you bled through my ER." Nate said quietly, "You were always part of the center." She turned on him. "Because you made me one. Because Wade did. Because you all did." No one answered. Good. The cottage had been shot open. The sea wind poured through it. Dawn had turned the edges of the broken glass silver. Somewhere outside, Hollis's men moved around the vehicles, speaking in low voices. Abby could hear the ocean beyond the dunes, steady and indifferent. She looked at the case. "Open it." Nate obeyed. Hollis stiffened slightly but did not stop him. Inside the archive looked smaller than its consequences. Abby picked up one photograph. Men on a dock. None of them familiar. On the back were initials and numbers. She picked up a folded page. Payment routes, names she did not know. Companies that sounded harmless enough to be dangerous. Dates connected to storms, salvage operations, and recovery missions. Her eyes found one name, Nathan Rourke. Then Wade Mercer. Then Lillian Rowe. Then lower on the page in a smaller notation. Family chain. Mercer line. Active only under breach conditions. Abby felt the room narrow around those words. She placed the page back in the case. "What does active mean?" Hollis answered. "It means if someone touched one branch, the others became relevant. Relevant. Protected, watched, or targeted, depending on who found the list first. My children." Hollis's silence was enough. Abby looked at Nate. His face had gone pale beneath the years and the scar. You knew Eli and Mara could be on a list. I knew they could become leverage if I came home. So you stayed dead. Yes. She stepped closer to him. And while you stayed dead, someone still found them. The words landed harder than any slap. Nate closed his eyes once. Yes. Abby turned back to the case. What do they want? Caleb answered this time. Control, confirmation, destruction. Depends which faction is moving. Abby almost laughed. Faction. Hollis said, the old compartment fractured years ago. Some want the archive buried. Some want it weaponized. Some want anyone tied to it erased because dead families cannot testify to old leverage chains. The phrase dead families moved through Abby like cold water. She looked at the blood on her hands. Not strangers' blood now. Caleb's blood. Family blood, whether she had accepted it or not. She thought of Eli's locked apartment. Mara's voice in the car. Nate standing in the cottage like a ghost with a pulse. Wade's compass in her pocket. When North breaks, listen. Abby closed the case. The sound was small. Final. One copy goes out, she said. Nate looked at her. Hollis did too. Abby continued, voice steady now. Not all of it. Enough to prove it exists. Enough that if the wrong people move against Eli or Mara, they know the rest becomes public. Hollis studied her. To whom? Someone outside your chain. That is not simple. Nothing in this room is simple. Nate said I have a journalist contact. Hollis shook his head. Too exposed. Caleb said legal trust. Blind release. Civilian channel. Abby looked at him. You are supposed to be unconscious. I am multitasking again. She ignored that and looked at Hollis. You know, a judge, a lawyer, somebody clean enough to scare dirty people. Clean is a dangerous assumption. Then find me someone dirty in a different direction. For the first time, Hollis looked almost approving. Wade would have said that. Abby's eyes cut to him. Do not hand my words to my father. Hollis lowered his gaze. Understood. Nate's voice came softer. This does not end it. I know. They may still come. I know. You and the kids will need protection. Abby turned to him. They needed a father. Nate flinched. This time she let herself see it. Then she looked away. Hollis's medic called that Caleb was stable enough for transport if they moved carefully. Abby checked him herself. His pulse was weak but present, his skin warmer than before. The dressing held. She leaned over him. You are going to a real medical bed. Caleb opened one eye. Is that negotiable? Number? You are very bossy for someone who found out she has a brother today. Abby paused. The word brother hung between them. It did not fit yet. It did not fall away either. You are very talkative for a man I can still sedate. His mouth curved faintly. Fair. Outside, the first clean light of morning spread over the dunes. The cottage looked ruined in it. Broken window, shot walls, blood-marked floor. Charts fluttering in the wind. A single coffee cup in the sink tipped on its side. Nate watched Abby as she gathered the papers she had chosen. The limited set. Enough names, enough proof, enough threat. Not justice. Not yet. Pressure. Control. A tourniquet around a wound too deep to close in one morning. She placed the documents into a waterproof sleeve, then handed it to Hollis. If this disappears, she said, I disappear the rest. Hollis took it. You have the rest. Number. She held his gaze. But they do not know that. For a second, the room went still. Then Caleb gave a weak sound from the floor. That definitely sounds like family. Abby did not smile. Not quite. Nate stepped toward her. Abby. She turned. He stopped immediately, careful not to come closer than she allowed. I know this is not forgiveness. No, she said, it is not. I know I do not get to come back because I survived. Good. His eyes shone in the pale light. But I need to ask one thing. You are not in a position to need anything. I know. She waited. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope protected inside a clear sleeve. On the front were two names written in his hand. Eli, Mara. Abby stared at them. Her throat tightened so violently she almost hated him for that too. What is this? Not an excuse. Good. Not everything. Better. Just enough that when they ask why the answer comes from me, instead of men like Hollis. Hollis said nothing from across the room. Abby did not take the envelope. Not at first. Nate held it between them with the caution of a man offering something breakable to someone he had already broken. "You do not get to make yourself noble on paper," she said. His voice was quiet. "I am trying not to make myself absent again." That one found a place under her ribs. She hated that it did. Slowly, Abby took the sleeve. "I decide when they see it." "Yes." "I decide if they see you." "Yes." "If they hate you, you do not get to correct them." Nate's face tightened. "Yes." She slipped the envelope into her coat pocket beside Wade's compass. Outside, Hollis's team called that transport was ready. Caleb was lifted carefully onto a stretcher. He tried to make a comment and passed out before finishing it. Abby checked his pulse as they carried him through the ruined doorway. Still there. Thin, stubborn, alive. Nate stayed inside the cottage, watching from the broken window as the medical van waited beyond the dunes. Abby stepped onto the porch. The wind was cold. The ocean hammered the shore beyond the rise, endless and gray under the morning sky. Behind her, Nate said her name once more. She stopped but did not turn around. "I picked the version where you stayed alive long enough to hate me," he said. Abby closed her eyes. 5 years ago, she would have called that love. Last night, she would have called it betrayal. Now she had no clean word for it. She turned halfway. "You picked the version where I had to survive without the truth." Nate nodded. There was no defense left in him. "I know." Abby looked at the man who had been her husband, then her grief, then her ghost, and now something more difficult than all three. "Then survive this," she said, "because your children get to decide what you are next." She walked down the porch steps with Caleb's blood drying on her sleeves and the broken compass heavy in her pocket. Behind her, Hollis sealed the archive fragment into a hard black case. Ahead, the medical van waited with its back doors open. The morning had fully arrived. It did not make anything cleaner. It only made everything visible. The medical van took Caleb first. Abby rode beside him because nobody in that ruined cottage had enough authority to make her leave a bleeding patient in the hands of strangers. Hollis tried once with a look more than a sentence. Abby looked back at him over Caleb's stretcher, and whatever argument he had built in his head died before it reached his mouth. The van smelled like antiseptic plastic tubing, cold metal, and wet sand. Caleb lay strapped beneath a thermal blanket, his face turned toward the ceiling, lashes dark against skin that still looked too pale. The medic had started another line. Abby kept 2 fingers near Caleb's wrist, not pressing the pulse so much as reminding herself it was still there. Every few minutes, Caleb surfaced. His eyes would open halfway. He would search the blur of the van until he found her. Then he would sink back under. At one point, his mouth moved. Abby leaned closer. "What?" His voice came out thin. "Your bedside manner is terrifying." She checked the tape around his dressing. "Good. Fear keeps people compliant." His eyes nearly smiled before they closed again. The van moved inland, first away from the shore road, away from the cottage, away from Nate, standing in the pale morning with a gun at his hip, and the face of a man who had been brought back from the dead, only to find no one waiting with open arms. Abby looked through the narrow rear window until the dunes were gone. She had not said goodbye to him. Not really. Goodbye belonged to people who had earned clean departures. Nate had used his 5 years in silence. If he wanted words now, he could wait inside the damage he had made. Hollis followed behind them in a dark vehicle with the archive fragment locked in a case beside him. Abby could picture it there too clearly. The sealed pages, the names. Wade Mercer written like a charge on an old bill. Nathan Rourke written like a weapon. Her own family turned into a chain someone had tried to pull. When the van reached a private medical facility outside Wilmington, the doors opened into a garage instead of an ambulance bay. No signs, no waiting room, no families drinking bad coffee in plastic chairs. Just 2 nurses, a physician Abby did not know, and enough equipment to keep Caleb alive without asking the public system to admit he existed. Abby hated it immediately. She also checked the monitor before anyone else touched him. His pressure was soft. 20 minutes ago, she said. He reopened along the lower edge of the repair. He needs imaging blood ready, and someone who understands that moving him like cargo is why he is in this condition. The physician blinked once, then looked at Hollis. Hollis said, "Listen to her." That was the only useful thing he had said all morning. They moved Caleb to a bed in a small surgical suite. Abby watched the transfer, corrected a strap, adjusted his arm, and checked the dressing one more time before she let herself step back. Caleb's eyes opened again as the physician prepared to examine him. "Abby," he whispered. She moved beside him. "I am here." His gaze drifted to the ceiling. Did he look like him? She knew who he meant. Wade. Their father. The word still did not sit right. It had edges. She looked at Caleb's face, at the stubborn jaw, the left hand curling against the sheet even under sedation, the anger and hurt he wore like inherited bone. "No," she said. Caleb's eyes shifted toward her. "Good." Then the medication took him. Abby stood there longer than she needed to. Only when the door closed between her and the operating room did her body begin to remember it had limits. Her back ached. Her shoes were stiff with dried blood and sand. Her hands had been washed twice and still looked stained around the nails. She had not slept. She had eaten nothing but hospital coffee and fear. Hollis waited in the hallway. He had a paper cup in one hand. She looked at it. If that is coffee, it had better not be federal. It is terrible. Then it is honest. He handed it to her. She took one sip and nearly threw it away. "You undersold terrible." Hollis leaned one shoulder against the wall. For the first time since she had met him, he looked tired in a way he was not trying to hide. Not defeated, just worn thin. "The limited archive set is moving through a civilian legal channel," he said. Abby stared at the cup. "Someone outside your chain." "Yes, someone who does not owe you. Not comfortably. That is the closest thing to reassurance you have offered. It should slow them. Slow them." He nodded. "It gives the people behind this a reason to step back and count what they do not know." Abby looked at the closed surgical door. "And my children. Eli is at a secured apartment with 2 plainclothes officers nearby. Mara is still inside the hospital administrative wing. No contact since last night." She closed her eyes. The names steadied her and wounded her at the same time. "I need to see them." "I know." "No," Abby said. She looked at him. "You know logistics. You know coverage. You know routes. I need to see my children before anyone else turns this into another classified conversation." Hollis straightened. "Then we go." Port Providence Medical Center looked almost peaceful from the outside. That offended Abby. The glass entrance reflected morning light. A delivery truck idled near the service curb. A woman in scrubs hurried across the parking lot with a bagel in one hand and her badge swinging from her neck. Somewhere behind those walls, people were being born. Stitched, scanned, medicated, discharged, and told to wait. Hospitals did not honor personal apocalypse. They made room for it beside the next chart. Hollis took Abby through a side entrance and up to a quiet administrative office on the top floor. The room had too much beige carpet and a view of the river. Someone had left bottled water on a conference table. Someone else had placed tissues in the center as if grief could be arranged that neatly. Mara arrived first. She came through the door, fast hair pulled back badly, eyes bright and hard. She saw Abby and crossed the room without speaking. Her arms went around her mother with enough force to hurt. Abby held her back. For one breath, then two, she let herself be only a mother. Not a nurse, not a daughter, not a wife to a ghost. Mara pulled back first. Her hands stayed on Abby's shoulders, checking her the way Abby had checked patients for decades. "You have blood on your sleeve. It is not mine. That is not as comforting as people think." "I know." Mara looked toward Hollis. He stood near the door, silent. Her voice turned cold. "Is he the reason?" Abby answered before Hollis could. "He is part of the reason we are still alive. He is also part of why I do not trust anyone in this room completely." Mara nodded once, accepting both. The door opened again. Eli stepped in. He looked like Nate in the height and the shoulders. He looked like Abby in the eyes. That had always been true, but now it struck her differently, as if bloodlines had become evidence. He stopped when he saw her. Then his face broke just enough. "Mom." Abby reached for him. He crossed the room and held her hard. His chest shuddered once, but he did not cry. Not yet. Eli had learned too young how to keep the worst of himself private. She put one hand against the back of his head the way she had when he was little. "I am here." "You keep saying that like it answers things." "It answers one thing." He pulled back. "Are you hurt?" "No." He looked at her sleeve. "Not your blood." "No." His eyes moved to Mara, then Hollis, then back to Abby. "Tell us." Mara folded her arms. Plainly, Abby had spoken to families in consultation rooms for more than 30 years. She had told people their sons were in surgery. Their wives had coded their fathers were not waking up. She knew how to choose words that were true without being cruel. None of that helped. Not with her own children standing in front of her. She reached into her coat and felt the envelope Nate had given her. Eli and Mara written in his hand. Beside it, Wade's compass sat like a second heart, heavy and useless. Abby took a breath. "Your father is alive." The room went silent. Eli did not move. Mara turned her head slightly, as if she had heard the words from another room and needed them repeated. "No," Mara said. Abby nodded once. "Yes." Eli looked down at the carpet, then up again. "Alive where?" "Close." "That is not an answer." "No," Abby said. "It is all I can give safely in this room." Mara's face tightened. "Do not do that." "What?" "Do not start sounding like them." The words cut sharper than Abby expected. She accepted them. "You are right." Mara's eyes filled, but the tears did not fall. "How long have you known?" "Since last night." Eli's jaw worked. "You did not know before?" "No." He studied her face like he was looking for a crack, a hidden seam, some sign that his mother had been keeping one more secret under the floorboards. He found nothing because there was nothing. That mattered. Abby saw it register. Not relief, not forgiveness. But it moved one stone away from the wall, rising between them. Mara sat down slowly. 5 years, she said. No one answered. She looked at Abby. "He let us think he was dead for 5 years." "Yes." "Why?" Abby could feel Hollis watching her, but she did not look at him. This answer belonged to the family first. Because people tied to his work were using families as leverage. He believed that if he came home or contacted us in any traceable way, we would become a root to him. Eli's voice was flat. "So he made us mourn him instead." Abby nodded. "Yes." Mara let out a laugh that sounded like pain being forced through a small opening. "That is not protection." "No," Abby said, "it is not." Eli turned away and walked to the window. The Cape Fear River moved below, dark and steady. He put one hand against the glass, then pulled it back as if the cold surprised him. Did he stop loving us? The question was so quiet Abby almost wished she had not heard it. But she had. She walked toward him but stopped before touching him. "No," she said, "that was never the part missing." His shoulders rose with one slow breath. Mara looked down at her hands. "Did he watch us?" Abby's throat tightened. "Sometimes, from a distance. Not enough, never enough." "God," Mara whispered. Eli turned back. "Is he asking to see us?" Abby pulled the envelope from her coat. "He gave me this. It has both your names on it. He said it is not an excuse, not everything, just enough in his own words." Mara stared at it like it might move. Eli stepped closer. Abby held it between them. "You decide when to read it, or if. You can burn it. You can keep it sealed. You can throw it in the river. I will not choose for you." Eli took it because Mara did not. His fingers tightened around the clear sleeve. Mara looked at Abby. "Do you forgive him?" Abby did not soften the answer. "No." Mara seemed almost relieved. "Do you hate him?" Abby looked toward the window where the river caught a pale line of sun. "I did." Eli heard the past tense. He did not comment on it. Smart boy. Cruel boy. Her boy. Hollis stepped toward the door. "I will give you privacy." Mara looked at him. "You should have done that years ago." He took the blow without reply and left. The three of them remained in the office for a long time, not speaking much, not healing, just sitting near the truth while it did its damage. Eli eventually opened the envelope. Mara did not move closer, but she did not leave. He read the first page silently, then passed it to her. She hesitated, took it, read 3 lines, stopped, pressed the paper against her chest. "Not now," she said. Eli nodded. Abby did not ask what Nate had written. Not yet. When evening came, Hollis arranged separate transport for them. Eli refused at first, then accepted. After Abby said his father's enemies did not deserve the satisfaction of him being stubborn in predictable ways. Mara slept for 20 minutes in a chair with her hand wrapped around Abby's sleeve. When she woke, she pretended she had not. Caleb survived the second procedure. Abby was told this by a physician who seemed nervous to speak to her, which meant someone had warned him. She sat beside Caleb the next day in a private recovery room that smelled less like a hospital and more like money trying to imitate one. He opened his eyes and frowned at her. "You look worse. You say that every time you nearly die. I like consistency." She checked the monitor. His pressure was better. His color had improved. His wound was angry but holding. "Your insults are weaker," she said. "That is medically concerning." He turned his head slightly. "Did you tell them?" "My children." "Yes. Yes." He closed his eyes. "Bad. Real. That is worse. Usually." He opened his eyes again. "Do they hate him? They have the right. Do you?" Abby looked at the IV line, then at the man who shared half her blood and too many of her father's ghosts. "I am tired of hate being the only honest room in the house." Caleb absorbed that. Then, softly, "Wade would not know what to do with you." He did not. A faint smile touched his mouth. "No, I guess he did not." 2 weeks passed in fragments. Officially, a restricted federal event had intersected with a medical emergency. Officially, no public threat remained. Officially, Abby had been granted leave from Port Providence and encouraged to rest. She did not rest well. The house felt different after she returned. Not unsafe exactly. Watched. Measured. The locks were changed. A dark sedan sat on the street most nights, this one belonging to Hollis's people, which made Abby feel no better and slightly less terrified. Caleb came to stay in her spare room because his recovery required medical supervision, and Hollis believed hiding him near the nurse who could identify 3 stages of internal bleeding from across a kitchen was efficient. Abby called it invasive. Caleb called it family. She threatened to remove his pain medication every time. On his first morning there, she found him standing in her kitchen wearing one of Eli's old sweatshirts, pale and unsteady, trying to make coffee. She watched him pour grounds with reckless confidence. "Stop." He froze. "What? You survived surgery, gunfire, and government incompetence to come into my home and murder coffee." He looked at the machine. "I followed the line. There is no line for what you did." He leaned one hip against the counter, breathing carefully. "Is this how siblings bond? Not before caffeine." His smile came easier that time. Not easy. Easier. Living with Caleb was like having one of Wade's silences walk around wearing a different face. He rinsed every cup immediately. He stood where he could see doorways. He woke from sleep without making a sound. He asked too few questions and noticed too much. Abby noticed things too. The way his left hand curled when he was irritated. The way he hummed under his breath while reading the same off-key habit Wade had carried. The way grief flickered across his face whenever one of Abby's old childhood photos showed Wade smiling in a room Caleb had never entered. One night, Abby found him at the dining table with the doc photograph between his hands. Nate. Wade, the broken compass. Caleb touched the edge of the image. "He looks taller than I remember." Abby stood beside him. Memory adds height to men who leave. Caleb nodded like he had known that sentence for years without having words for it. "What was he like with you?" Abby asked. Caleb took his time. Careful. Funny when he forgot to be guarded. Restless. He would fix things without being asked, then vanish before anyone could thank him properly. Abby looked at Wade in the photograph. With me, he could make one good afternoon feel like it was supposed to cover 6 weeks of absence. Caleb's mouth tightened. Did it? Number. No, he said, it never does. They sat with that. No clean comfort. No sudden bond. Just two people assembling a father from wreckage and discovering the pieces cut both ways. Nate did not come to the house. That was Abby's rule. Hollis relayed proof of life twice a week, then stopped when Abby told him proof of life was a cruel phrase and he could use normal language or not call. After that, he would say Rourke is alive and nothing more. Sometimes that made Abby furious. Sometimes it let her sleep. Eli read Nate's letter in full before Mara did. He came to Abby's kitchen after midnight, eyes red but dry, and placed the pages on the table. Did it help? Abby asked. He shook his head. No. Then, after a long moment, he added, it sounded like him. That was not forgiveness. It was something smaller. Something that could be carried. Mara waited another week. When she finally read the letter, she did it alone on Abby's back porch under the yellow light wrapped in an old blanket. Abby watched from the kitchen window but did not go out until Mara opened the door. Her daughter's face was wet. I still do not forgive him. You do not have to. I am still mad at you, too. Abby nodded. For what? For being the one who is still here. The words were not fair. They were true enough to hurt. Abby stepped forward slowly, giving Mara time to refuse. Mara did not. Abby wrapped her arms around her daughter and felt the first sob break loose. I know, Abby whispered. Mara cried like someone who had been saving it for 5 years and did not trust it to stop. When Nate finally saw them, it happened in a borrowed marina office at dusk. Not Abby's house. Not the hospital. Neutral ground, if such a thing existed, for a family blown apart by secrets and seawater. Hollis waited outside. Caleb stayed back at Abby's house partly because he was still recovering, and partly because Abby told him this room already had enough ghosts. Nate stood when they entered. He looked more frightened than he had in the cottage under fire. Eli noticed, too. You look older, he said. Nate gave a nervous half-smile. That happens. Mara's eyes flashed. Do not make jokes unless they are good. The smile disappeared. Fair. No one hugged. No one crossed the room quickly. Abby stood near the door because her children had asked her to come, not because she believed she could make this gentler. Eli spoke first. Did you ever come to my school? Nate nodded. Twice. From across the street. Eli's face hardened. I graduated. I know. You were there. Far back, left side of the stadium. Eli looked away. Mara's voice came next, sharp and trembling. Did you call on my birthday and hang up? Nate closed his eyes briefly. Once. 3 times. Mara laughed through tears. I hated those calls. I know. No, you do not. You are right. That became the rhythm. Question. Answer. Wound. No defense. Nate did not ask them to understand. He did not say he had no choice. He did not dress his absence in noble words. Whenever the truth made him smaller, he let it. Abby respected him for that. She hated that she did. When the meeting ended, Eli allowed Nate to say goodbye without turning away. Mara took the second letter Nate offered her, but she did not open it. That was enough for one dusk. Autumn settled over Wilmington with cool rain, low skies, and the smell of salt coming off the river. Abby returned to Port Providence Medical Center before she felt ready because ready had never been a condition of survival. The first night back, Tessa hugged her in the medication room and then pretended she had not. Dr. Shaw looked her over and said she still looked like hell. Abby told him his bedside manner had not improved. He said neither had hers. The ER did what it always did. It filled. A fisherman came in with 3 crushed fingers. A child with asthma clung to a stuffed rabbit while Abby adjusted the mask. A college student cried over a panic attack and apologized for taking up space, so Abby sat beside her for 30 seconds and told her oxygen did not judge. Near midnight, the ambulance bay doors opened. Abby's body tensed before her mind caught up. Just paramedics. Just rain. Just another patient. Still, some sounds never returned fully to innocence. At dawn, she stepped through the staff exit into cold air smelling of diesel salt and the first clean edge of winter. The sky over the river had begun to pale. Ship cranes stood black against the light. A truck waited near the far curb. Caleb sat in the passenger seat looking healthier and annoyed. Nate was behind the wheel. They were arguing about the radio through the open window. "I am telling you this station is noise," Caleb said. Nate kept one hand on the wheel. "It is music. It is 3 chords and regret." Abby stopped beside the truck. Caleb looked at her. "He has terrible taste." Nate looked at Abby, too. The morning light caught the gray at his temples and the scar near his hairline. He did not smile too much. He had learned that would be asking for something. "Eli called," he said. "He said dinner Sunday is still on if everyone behaves." Caleb lifted one hand. "I made no promise." Abby looked from one man to the other. This was not peace, not forgiveness, not a family made whole by the simple fact of breathing. But Caleb was alive. Nate was alive. Her children had the truth or enough of it to begin choosing what to do with the rest. Abby touched the brass compass in her coat pocket. The needle still did not point north. Maybe it never had. Maybe it had only been waiting for the map to break. Nate reached across and pushed the passenger door open. Abby stood there 1 second longer, listening to the hospital doors slide shut behind her. Then she climbed into the truck. They pulled away from Port Providence as the city woke around them, the river catching the first full light of morning, the hospital shrinking in the side mirror until it looked ordinary again. Just another building from a distance. Just another place where blood-silenced duty and family had collided hard enough to break a life open and leave something breathing inside it.